So, Wieteke, can you tell us how this all began?
Yeah, so it started really young for me at an early age, by what I now understand to have been visitations. So extraterrestrial beings were visiting me, mainly in the nights. And I also traveled in my experience to see them and locations where they quote unquote brought me to. And this was introductionary phase, but also part of hybridization project. And maybe this sounds really technical right now, but we can dive deeper into these things later. So now I understand what was going on, but I did not when I was a child. I was raised by a single mom and living with my sister with her. And she was raising us Christian. So within that paradigm, there really was no room to share about these things so much. So I kept most of it to myself. And I went out of the house at age 17, not having told basically hardly anybody about these experiences. And by 23, these experiences kept intensifying. And I felt, really also confused about it because I didn't know what it was. And in Europe, there's not much talk about these things. So I went to actually see a therapist to ask, how can I manage these, what I described as very intense dreams. Now I understand they were out-of-body experiences and I had real contact. But I didn't know what was going on, so I had to learn how to manage the emotions and to realize it was a part of me. So the therapist was an ex-hypnotherapist, which was very useful because they have a broader perspective. And he taught me how I could use this information for my benefit. He says, you're not being attacked. When you resist, it will feel more like this. But if you recognize you can communicate with this, then you can use it in your benefit. So I realized that really quickly, actually. Later I was like, oh my God, for so long I was fighting this and keeping it to myself. But when I finally understood it, everything turned 180 degrees. And I suddenly realized I can communicate with this. This is not just happening to me. It's something I can work with.
But how old were you when this first started?
My first memories are 2.5, 3 years old. Because I remember standing in this crib with bars, like you hold the bars. It keeps the kids from crawling out. Standing, holding the bars, eyes wide open, completely awake, seeing the beings come through the wall, come closer to me. And there were a lot of blackouts, I must say, because I was so young and certain things I couldn't process yet. But say age 6 or 7 already, I got a lot more storylines in it. Okay, we're going here. You're showing me that. This is something I need to remember, although I didn't know why. Things about our world, about people, how we treat each other, fear-based beliefs, lies, living from your heart or not living from your heart, and the consequences of this. Also, how we treat the planet was a really big aspect of the downloads that I got. So I had a really big affinity for animals and nature, always had. And I was the first in my family who wanted to be vegetarian. At age 12, I felt strong a person enough to say, okay, I stop eating meat. And I became the first vegetarian, having to really convince also 2 households, my father and my mother were separate, that I didn't want to do that anymore. But it was clearly results from these experiences for me, and the conclusions I drew out of that. Simply feeling this resonates with me, this doesn't. I felt like nudged, even though I couldn't understand why. I couldn't see the bigger picture, but the conviction was really strong. Also, when I was in school, in elementary school already, certain things that the teacher taught us about history and economy, and I was so dazzled by it. It was so different from what the ETs showed me. And I just felt in my heart the huge distance between the 2 points of view. And I realized it doesn't make sense. But you can't say that, or at least you're taught to believe you can't stand up to your teacher and say you're wrong. But I did feel that very often in the teachings that no, it's not at all like this. And I couldn't understand why I was so strongly convinced of it. I knew I got it from elsewhere, information from elsewhere. But only later down the road, I saw how much impact it actually had on my life to continue to choose a path from the heart. So when I understood how to work more with the dreams, it was around age 23. And only a few months after stopping seeing this therapist for a few sessions and realigning my communication with the beings for the first time, then I saw a UFO close encounter with a friend. So I had a witness. And that was pretty amazing. It was like a low flying over big triangular object with lights on the corners. And we both had no idea what we saw. But from then on, my dreams were flooded with ETs really being, you could say, in my face, going like, hey, and peace signs and joking around. And I started to realize there is something really big shifted. And because they knew I had overcome my fear for the interaction, they would bring it to a next level. And this is why they brought in, you could say, the UFO in that moment. And
but can you tell me a little bit more about these entities that you had contact with? First of all, were you the only one in the family having these contacts? And could you also tell me a bit more what they looked like and how they approached you?
Yeah. So as far as I know, I am the only one who had conscious contact, but I know I'm not the actual only one. I know more family members were involved. They just didn't choose to remember. This is how my guides explain it to me, because I did ask, why am I the only one? And they also told me it's part of my higher self agreement to be the only one and to be born in a family that had, in a sense, actually resistance against this idea, because I had to overcome resistance in myself to honor the open agreement I had with them to share this later down the line with the world. I didn't know that then, but I had to deal with very close to your skin resistance very young and find a way to rebalance that in myself so that I would be more prepared for the time frame that I'm born in, where a lot of people still have this resistance, so it wouldn't upset me later down the line. So I got really early practice, you could say. But still, a part of my family, as far as I understand, was involved in the same kind of experiences. They just chose to black out much more, to not remember. So like I said before, when I was really young, my very first experiences were, with beings coming through the wall. And okay, so there is a thing called screen memories. Our physical mental brain creates overlays. If a particular image is too shocking, in a sense, to process in one time, your brain will overlay it with something that is close to it or a symbol of it. So especially in the beginning stages, there were interactions with the ETs that we understand to be the Greys. And these are pretty... not too charming to look at, especially for a child, and if you're not used to this. And so I saw a mixture of machine people. So a part of them was mechanic, which is crazy because I really didn't understand what I was looking at. A mix of almost, now I would know a word for this, cyborg, kind of like with machines in the body and half humanoid coming through the walls. And this was freaking me out already. And later they found different ways to communicate with me, and also realizing, okay, you're a child, you like animals. So they came very often as animals. And that was a new phase. I was a little bit older. And for instance, all of a sudden there was a bunny in my room or a cat in my room, and I knew I was awake and I could see them. But there was something odd about them always. Like the tail was weird, or the eyes were usually very big. And often they were white animals. So this is how I saw them. And as soon as we locked eye contact, I shifted to a different world in my experience. So there was a moment where there was direct connection made and there was a shift of dimensions. And then another story would follow. I would no longer be in my room. I would be, for instance, in a round space. And now I understand it might have been a ship or a place on their planet. So everything, it sounds dreamlike, like a dream, but the experience is very physical and tangible. And so you wake up and you are literally not sure if it was, where you are. You're so engaged in these encounters. And later...
How often did it happen to you?
As a child, many times. And because I was afraid, I used to scream. I woke up screaming. And if you ask my mother, I woke up screaming a lot. So I actually woke up my mother and my sister. But there were phases, I would say waves. There was a moment during my teenage years where it intensified, then it calmed down again. It got much stronger, 17, 18 years, 19 years. And there was a revelation there because I was 18, I believe, when there was again a white cat in my room and I looked at him and in front of my eyes, he warped into a humanoid figure. This was one of the first hybrids that contacted me. And he showed me his real form. And I realized it also. This is your real form. And in telepathic contact, they let me know, we have been playing a costume party with you. So now we are showing you what is behind the animals. This is the real form. And I got that. I was really impressed with that as well. And the hybrids, I could handle this image. It wasn't like the Greys, not such a big difference from us. And now I'm more used to that as well. But yeah, they took it step by step. Yeah.
Did they explain to you why you were chosen to have this experience?
So like I said a little earlier, it's an higher self agreement. But like most people, I was not aware of this. But then there is also a part where they're not allowed to explain the whole story because it would take away your process of discovery. So if you choose on a higher soul level to step into this kind of garden that has all the high hedges, but you can't look over it and it looks really complicated, a labyrinth, I was looking for the word. If you choose to step into labyrinth because every time you turn a corner, you're going to find a gift, they're not allowed to explain the whole thing to you. So I had to feel full-fledged fear in certain circumstances. I understand that now. To overcome it for myself and then later see when you look back at the experience, oh, wait a minute. If they would have revealed to me beforehand, oh, you're just going to discover this and that will be easier, I would have probably not done it. I would have left it aside, kind of from laziness and comfort. So because I think we're so raised to remain in the safety zones, there was an agreement to be pushed out of that. And we all manifest that in one way, shape or form in our lives, as I understand it now. Whether you have a challenging relationship with a friend or your job isn't what you want it to be, or I have these multidimensional experiences, the fundamental lesson is the same. So I just chose a route that seems further away. But if people ask me now, I would say it's no different from your challenges in your life. And I learned the same kind of lessons. But did you know when you started your job that you would hate it? You see, so it's kind of like this. But hating a job can give you the courage to move away from it. So for me, it was to find within myself that whatever I disliked about this, I just didn't understand it yet in this case. And with understanding and empathy and compassion, you can embrace it and use it on your way later down the line.
But after your first physical, or at least it looked like physical, UFO experience, what happened after that?
So when I had the actual encounter, so I was with a friend, like I said, low, flying over big object. Yeah, that was amazing. I've had many more sightings after that, but not like this. This was really close. It was a wake-up call. I understand that now. So my dreams intensified and started to point more directly at the idea of ETs. Then I started for the first time also looking on the internet about this subject. But in that time frame, there wasn't so much to be found about it, and it was very fear-based. So as soon as I started reading about abduction stories, and this was the first time I read that word, I didn't even know there was a word for it, I got really scared because I recognized so many things, and I thought, oh, I just don't want to be a part of this. So I denied these similarities and I stopped looking at it. But it left me with a very strong yearning to go do self-development work, meditation or something like this. So I had chosen eventually to do art school because in art I could express more of my experiences than in words at that time. And after art school, I immediately, literally the day after my graduation, I took a flight to Asia and I went to a monastery in Thailand and I started doing meditation techniques and things like this. And it felt really good. Every time I started to prepare for a meditation, I got these goosebumps all over and I just felt a confirmation that I couldn't explain. So I kept down that path and eventually on that route of exploration, the idea or the concept of channeling was brought to me. Like other people introduced to me by borrowing me a book or something, that even existed. And then I started to realize, wow, there are people in this world that choose to share the information that I already know I've been receiving for so long. And I didn't know you could do that. I just thought I had something loose, you know? And I was really moved, emotionally moved, and also very inspired by other channelers. And I felt so in awe with their path and their courage, most of all. And still, it didn't dawn on me that I could do a similar thing, not at all. It still took years before that happened. But eventually, I realized there is open contact, and my guides literally spelled it out for me. They say, you can do this for others if you want. You're ready now. But it was an open invitation. And
so did you feel that this was a part of the plan all the time, that you were going to reach this stage of becoming a medium?
I literally didn't get it until they spelled it out to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I, even when I was already listening to other channelers, and when they told me you could do this, my first mental resistance was, why? Because other people are already doing it. Why would I do it too? Because there are already like high quality channels out there. But then they, in a second, downloaded to me, every voice is unique and you would have a different bandwidth and there is a generation shift going on and the language is continuously needs to be fine-tuned and you have practiced for so long and we know that if you step into this journey full-heartedly and without expectations, that the impact of it, you know, it can be a shift that we know you desire on a higher level. You have signed up, in a sense, for the possibility of this. And I just felt all of this information. The words don't even cover it. I felt it rush through my body, that knowingness. And I felt their excitement and it sparked a huge excitement in myself. And then I thought, what the heck, let's just try it. And I started doing what I still call it, it's an out-of-hand experiment. I started doing test sessions, facilitating channeling for other people, and really listening in, see, you know, if this isn't going to blow me off my feet, I'm not going to do it. I was like this. But the information that came through was so personal and direct and to the point, I couldn't deny it. And then I thought, okay, well, if this is truly assisting other people and it gives me so much joy to be in this state also, then I will continue this for as long as it feels that way.
But the entities that you are now channeling?
Yeah, so my personal most close guide is Arjun. They don't actually have names in their society, but Arjun is like a working name or a working title because they understand we use names so that we can refer to him somehow. He is a male member of a hybrid race. So hybrid means partially human DNA as we understand it today. And the simplest way to say it, human DNA from a version of us in the future. And we understand the gray ETs to be extraterrestrials, but in fact, they are human beings from a parallel Earth from the future. This is what grays are. So the grays at some point developed into a direction in their society where they could no longer produce, create themselves. Their physiology had come to a stop because they damaged the planet to such a degree. There was no lively environment anymore. And then nature itself says your species came to a dead end. So they started to realize that quite late in the process, because too late to save their own species. But then they realized the only way out to preserve our being and to assist past linear timelines of humanity from going into the same direction we went would be to travel back into time, visit that version of Earth, and begin to hybridize our species with their DNA so that a new type of human could, develop with a much stronger heart consciousness. So their dead end is the result of separating the mind from the heart and denying the heart, denying the emotions, completely suppressing that and living fully on mental control. And this is why my screen memory of the grays when I was a child looked machinery-like, because it was really that energy frequency of almost robot beings that have forgotten how to feel. So they understood they had to cross, in a sense, genetic features with people who have a very strong empathic, nature. So people were selected on versions of Earth. Like a lot of timelines are crossing here together. And some of the grays made it to do this project and some didn't. But eventually we are now on a timeline where they had success. And they created eventually several hybrid races, of which the youngest ones are called the YahYel. Arjun is a member of the YahYel. And since if you would choose to believe in the idea of incarnation, then you could also say he is a future version of me. So this is why he picked me or I picked him. This is simultaneously happening on a higher level because we are really close to each other. There is a genetic link and energetic link that makes it very easy for us to connect. So he introduced himself the moment when I saw the cat change into a hybrid, when I was 18. Before then, it was more grays and assisting ETs, but not yet the hybrids that I'm working with now. So this evolved as I was growing up as well.
The idea that they come from the future seems to us absolutely illogical, impossible.
Yes.
So can you explain how this can function? Because if it's so that it's possible to come from the future and go back and adjust things, then I mean, in our way of seeing it, then everything actually can be changed.
Yes.
Every type of development can be rearranged, and so that seems quite confusing to us.
Yeah.
So how can we understand that?
The confusing part in that way of looking at things linearly is to think there is only one timeline. But there are an infinite amount of timelines. So literally when you travel back in the past, you don't alter the timeline that has already unfolded. So their path was going to be a dead end. Anyway, that path didn't change. They went to a parallel timeline where everything was still open. It could go wrong, quote unquote, or it could go nicer. So they just offered a more preferred frequency to one of the parallel timelines. So to bring it to our own lives, say, for example, you could time travel with intent back to when you were 6, just before you had a car accident. and tell your 6-year-old self, don't go there because you will have an accident. And then they don't go there. But the 6-year-old that had the car accident still exists and had the accident. It's just a different parallel dimension. So as they explain it to me, all possibilities and probabilities coexist. So if you travel through time, the reason that you can do that to begin with is because everything is here and now. Within God or source or all that is, everything already exists right here, right now. Your experience of it is determined by your focus. So you can focus on a happy memory or a sad one, and determining or depending on your focus, you can say, I had a good childhood or a bad one. But you decide. So it is with intention that they planted themselves in a different time frame and started adding a new energy frequency. But actions were involved. We are in a physical reality. So they had to take actual actions and start a hybridization program to ground that energy frequency. But since to just drop a hybrid race on a planet that doesn't even know that hybrids are created is very blunt. You can't do that. It would result in chaos. So it's really smart. We are like a living organism, the whole human race on the planet. And we have asked for peace and love and balance from our hearts so many times. It's incredible. They keep showing me the asking. It's humongous. And they say wherever there is asking, there is an answer given. So we have manifested this entire storyline of the Greys traveling back in time, starting this program, and bringing us this one particular solution out of many as a part of answering ourselves. So from a bigger perspective, we are creating this. And whoever is watching this right now has co-created a version of Earth where apparently some people believe this is happening, and where maybe you may co-create a future where we will have open contact with extraterrestrials at some point. But to just land is too blunt. So what we do, so I'm one of the people apparently that had the open agreement to be a part of the preparation for landing, you could say. And the friendliest way to introduce a new species to another species is to just first have some people who know about it or who saw it, and they give it secondhand information. So through me, when Arjun speaks through me, you are free to make up your mind whether you want to believe this or not. So you hold your freedom, you hold your mentally needed boundaries, and nothing is too paradigm shattering right away, because they're not just walking into your living room, you could say. So this is the first step of open contact, and it works through the biological mechanism of who we are as a human species. And we're really just being introduced to our brothers and sisters that we have invited to our own tea party. That's how I see it. But baby steps. And for them, it's most important now, where we are now, to share their vision on life and general information that we can use constructively in our life. So it's actually very grounded. A good channeling, in my opinion, is something pragmatic, something that you can use in your earth life. And if that information is understood by us to be a truth that refers to our own source, because it's your higher self that you're communicating with, really, then we can accept more in our hearts that we're actually looking in a mirror, that it's a part of us. And when that openness comes in us, then we can openly communicate one day, and they can really ground their frequency more into our planet.
But how do you get these messages? I mean, how does it appear inside you? Is it something you hear, or is it your thoughts that are just pop up in your head, or how does it go on?
It's not so much a sound, or it's more, I'm a visual person. So I get a lot of images, so I'm kind of watching a movie, but the concept is first. So there is an entire immediate understanding of a concept. And then additionally, they run pictures where I need clarification. And I'm just picking the words on the go as I translate the concept for the questioner. And this is a really interesting process because while I do that, they scan the questionnaire to see if the answer actually arrives well. And if it doesn't arrive well, if it doesn't enter, they change the concept for me. They fine-tune it to the need of the questionnaire. So they may nudge me, oh, this isn't working for that person, try this angle. Or check if this arrived well. So there is a very consistent passion from their end to bring it as a whole and complete and clear as possible. And it is my passion to facilitate in the transference of that idea.
Let's get back to the one of the things you mentioned about the kind of human construction and the emotional side of humans. Why do we have this side, and why is it so urgent or interesting for other types of entities to try to have the same type of emotional spectre as we have?
In case of the grace, because I can't speak for all other entities, I don't know, but I know for them, they realized that in their particular journey through life, by suppressing that, they had misunderstood a really, really important aspect of who they are. They had amputated a part of their own beingness by saying, oh, this doesn't belong. And we're just going to use only this part. And when they realized that, it shook the entire civilization to the core. And they realized also we have to do something to fix that, quote unquote. Although they can't fix it for their own species, literally, but they could create a new species wherein that would be more balanced. So I only know for them and in their journey and in their relationship to us.
But why do you think emotions are so important?
Oh, yeah, well, it's our guiding mechanism. So you can't calculate mentally how you will feel about another person that you're yet to meet, or about how you will like a particular holiday. You have to actually go there and experience it. But if you have a premonition about something, or you have a dream, this is already your higher self nudging you, letting you know, well, it's going to work out nice, or this is maybe not for you. And by your emotions, you learn to see where you have limiting beliefs and where you have an open mind. So it's only by the navigation compass of your emotions that you get to know yourself to the deepest. And by ignoring that, you take a route that is not holistic. And this is why emotions are so important, as I understand it at this point.
Mm-hmm. They seem to be existing in a kind of not only a different time frame, but also a type of different dimensional sphere.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about dimensions and how this thing works actually in the universe?
Well, there are infinite dimensions. So you could actually already say that the version of you yesterday, like who you were yesterday, now lives in a different dimension. Because if he was in the same dimension as you would run into each other, which is very complicated. That's not how you were programmed. But every single here and now moment has its own energy frequency. And you could literally say that every split second, every Planck length to be exact, of time passing, quote unquote, as we created in our universe, is a different dimension already. But you could say, roughly speaking, there is a physical dimension, there is a quasi-physical dimension, and then there is a non-physical, like many actually dimensions. The majority is non-physical. We're just on the outer crust of existence that has densified so much that eventually it turned into matter. And then again, it's also not the most physicalized. There are even stronger and deeper physicalizations of matter. So it's fascinating to me. It is absolutely endless. And it is as close as you just remembering a moment that was a minute ago. Even though other people say, oh, it's very far and these beings are from another dimension. It's no different from you knowing you have past versions and you will have future versions. Like you will be another version of you in 5 minutes, but it will still be you. And you know that and you don't doubt it, but you're actually talking about and already looking at the idea of dimensions right there.
But they seem to travel in ships, and at the same time they are able to kind of abduct you non-physically.
Yeah, I had a lot of mind-boggling thoughts about that myself. Plus, you say, well, abduct is a word they don't use. They say visitations and counter-visitations. So when we are there, it's a counter-visitation, as I understand it from the hybrids that I work with. And it sounds so much nicer, because if you use the word abduction, you keep choosing a victim role as well. And you keep saying it happened to me, I had nothing to say in this. And you actually do. You do have a voice in it, but you have to realize that you do. And to me, it felt physical. So the quote-unquote abductions felt like real. And I asked Arjun about this, and he says, well, in another dimension, it was real. So if you shift there with your entire focus, you have a real physical experience. Just like my past version of 5 minutes ago was a real physical version of me. So as soon as you speak parallel dimensions and you don't see it right here, right now with this physical version, you say, oh, that is non-physical. But the experience can be physical. So it's hard to draw a line and to say where something is physical and where it is not, because it is an overlapping layer wherein these visitations are taking place. But it's true that you can have a partner laying next to you and knows you are in the same bed while you're visiting another species in another dimension. It's just that the focus point that is having the visitation experience is in a slightly parallel dimension in that moment.
Okay.
I also understand that it was more important to have this like blunt seeing of objects, and people even in this 40s, 50s, 60s time frame, because it was an introduction and it had to be really obvious and really clear. And where we are now, it's more, there's a selection going on at this moment. Our Earth is, as they explain it to me, splitting in versions where open contact is more relevant and where it isn't. And so right now we are looking at the overlap also of populations, of humanity. And some people will be in the right energy frequency to perceive a craft and some won't. And you can literally be standing next to another person. You may see something in the sky and they may not be able to see it. So now we're beginning to talk about, it's a different kind of wake-up call. First, there was just plain introduction. We exist, we're here, we have been witnessed. And then now, because we are ready for a more complete picture of the whole, by these kind of seemingly contradictory experiences of one person seeing something and the other not, which is purely quantum physics, really, and a double slit experiment all over again, they're actually showing us, look, you create your own reality. Now you have a free choice. Do you want us in your world or do you not? So it becomes more about, this is a mirror. This is the advanced level of introduction. We're ready for more information. So we get a more specified way of witnessing. It's really interesting what's going on right now because it's much more multi-layered.
Have they ever told you anything about what the concept is of being a human on Earth? What are we actually here for?
You're here to be you. So within all that is, every life, every perspective counts. The perspective of a mosquito on the wall is just as valuable as being human. It's just that we think it is very different because we can't identify with the mosquito. It's such a different world. But as we become more aware of ourselves and get to know ourselves, and we begin to remember that we are a part of all that is and that everything we look at is a reflection, then you begin to realize, oh, wait a minute, I can communicate with this little being that I call a mosquito, and I can see its perspective, and it is amazing. and just as full of awe as my own life, if I choose to look at it that way, in a more open-minded manner, because there's magic everywhere all the time. We've just been taught out of it. So I do realize that we as a species have gone into a very specific journey of forgetfulness, where for many other species, it is common sense that you realize that you are part of the one and the all, and that we have chosen to forget it and to rediscover it. It's a very specific flavor, a very typical kind of color of a journey. But once you realize that, you can take a lot of beautiful gifts out of that, as I understand it.
Well, today you have quite frequent contact with Arjun, as I understand it. And the messages that you bring, if you should summarize, what is actually their main message, or what do they want us to know?
This is the one they continue to repeat, and also other channelers of hybrid races, the same bottom line: to follow your excitement to the best of your ability, as far as you can take it, until you can take it no further, with zero expectation as to what the outcome ought to be. Because the energy frequency of excitement, when you feel excited or curious or passionate about something, that is your actual true nature. So that is your emotional compass at your perfect north, your natural north. And it shows you into the direction of your quote-unquote divine self. So whatever you will act on, empowered by this excitement, will bring you the next perfect puzzle piece to make the biggest leap of expansion possible for you in that moment. Now, you're always expanding, but we have free will, so we can choose to break that, to slow it down. So out of fear-based beliefs, we often pick a route that is less expensive, although you're still the evolution is continuing. You're still evolving, but you could say there is acceleration taking place when you come from a love-based source in yourself. So they are most excited about helping us remember that we actually are pure unconditional love, and that if we all start to stand in our power and embody our passions from a pure place and without expectations, then they say our whole race will work in harmony, and we will have what we constantly still ask for: world peace and creativity and free energy, and it will all be there because we are already walking around with this. We're just not accessing it completely because we don't believe we can. So there's a lot of fear still and limiting beliefs.
But why do we have to go through all these phases with all this suffering?
Yeah. So the shortest answer to that, as I have come to understand, is the joy of rediscovery is just so much greater when you have hidden your secret really well. So you have to forget who you really are to truly have an embodied experience of rediscovering who you really are. And that's why, we co-create circumstances that can definitely be labeled as suffering, because that's not who we are. And that is why we suffer. And that's, again, the emotional compass showing us this is not who you are. It's not love, it's not excitement or joy. And it's purely functional in that sense. If you leave judgment out, it's purely functional. We use suffering and resistance and friction as a tool to rediscover what we do want. Yeah.
Even if it takes 1,000 years.
Yeah, but that's relative. It's relative to them, and eventually it's also relative to us, because if you are really happy in that moment, there's nothing else. You don't even think about maybe suffering that you had a few days before. It will melt away. There is only here and now. So we're being invited to focus in who we really are. And then 1,000 years is a blink of an eye, is what Arjun literally says.
Where is this going to take us?
Yeah, that is definitely very exciting. I have no idea. I can only in following my own heart, sense that this should be really good without saying should. It's gonna be something amazing. But again, you can only walk this path without expectations. So it's every here and now when I feel my heart make a leap, while I'm on this journey, I'm just deciding to trust that and to continue to walk in this direction. Now, of course, my mental mind can make all kinds of beautiful pictures of what that future world may look like. And I allow myself to daydream, but there's no way I can guarantee it or something. It's just, I can only see the proof of the results of their teachings in my own everyday life. And that alone is worth it for me to have this contact going on.
I have one last question. For you personally, I mean, this is, has, as you said, been going on since you were like 3-4 years old. How does this affect your daily life, and how do you see it's going to affect your future?
So this last question, how will it affect my future? I don't know, because the point is really for me to be more here and now. And so in my daily life, it helps me constantly to remember it is about being here and now. And whatever will be, will be. But being here and now means I'm living my life to the fullest. And that takes even the need for a future away. It's crazy, but if you're really here and now, you don't care what will happen next. It's not that you're being ignorant and that you don't take care of paying your rent next month, stuff like this. You're still living in this society, you have to be grounded. But the real long image, I don't know. I don't even know if I will live to see open contact. It's just that right now my life is so rich. Facilitating this and feeling this energy, it's a choice like for every day. You choose it again because you still feel this love frequency around it. And I have also said to my friends, if one day that starts to feel less, I will begin to look for other things and start to do what excites me more in that moment. Because even by doing that, I will be adding to this journey. Because this is the invitation for everybody. You don't have to be a channeler. If being an artist is more of your energy frequency, your passion, then that too is a route that can bring in open contact eventually, because you lift yourself to the frequency where they are. So you will meet eventually. It's like bound to happen in a sense. But there's no one way to get to that. And their point is very much to stop thinking about figuring out ways, because you can't figure it out. Your mind can't do that. It's not built to do that. So in my daily life, I learned to trust my heart much more, to do things that seem completely ununderstandable to some other people or my own rational mind, to just continue to feel in, to tune in with myself. Does it feel good? So you get to know yourself in a very different way. And of course, it leaves me sometimes puzzled and thinking crazy thoughts like, yeah, since I've become more and more aware of multidimensionality, I often feel like I live in two worlds and they're really infiltrating each other, and I see things happen and I know I just shifted a reality, and there's a lot of synchronicity in my life, and I speak to objects and things and situations around me, and if something drops as an unexpected moment, I'm like, what am I telling myself? So my whole relationship to my surroundings has become much more of a dance. And I think it has been in me since I had these experiences since quite young. So it's quite easy for me to step into this kind of perceiving the world. But it is still intensifying. And it brings up new questions in me as well. I'm constantly learning. There's no final end station or something. I'm constantly also being given new things to explore deeper and about myself. Yeah, I like that.
If you had the ability to go back to when you were 3 years old and make a choice again to follow the path that you have been on, or to follow a path of a more normal person, what would you have chosen?
Now I would say I wouldn't change a thing. Everything that I ever criticized, every human being that in my mental mind perhaps did something against my will or offended me, I invited them. I made it happen. I co-created it, and it gave me an opportunity to learn a deeper aspect of myself. And for that, I'm grateful to them and myself. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.